Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. I am so happy today to bring on someone different from who we often have. What's similar is that he's got a new book. I love talking to authors, but he is a retired Marine, and he has an incredible story. I haven't talked to that many people who have been in the military, so I'm really excited to learn his story and to learn some gems from his experience that he has shared in his new book. Let me tell you who he is. He is a retired U.S. Marine with more than 22 years of experience in training and leadership. He's a sought-after keynote speaker, and his expertise in communication, recruiting, ethical decision-making, and resilience have made him a guest speaker for prestigious agencies such as the Travis Manion Foundation, Mary Kay Corporation, Alabama Education Association, and a variety of military commencement ceremonies. He's a new author. We're excited to talk to him. Please join me in welcoming Dimyas Perdue.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey. Good morning. How are you?
I love that these years as a Marine, right? I have a nephew, well, actually, I guess he's my cousin, who just finished high school. And he's so interested in going into the Marines and feels like of all of the armed services that's really the one, that he wants to be a part of. What is so special about the Marines?
Well, there are a few things. I mean, you got to remember now, you're talking to a Marine, so I might sound pretty.
Brag on your division of the military. It's okay.
Yeah. So what's so special about the Marine Corps? Well, one of the first things I like to tell people is the journey of becoming a Marine is completely different than it is for any other branch of service. For the most part, every other branch of service, their basic training, it's about 6 to 7 weeks before they graduate and earn their titles. So joining the Air Force, maybe 5 to 7 weeks, depending on what the job is, but the same thing with the Army, same thing with the Navy. But for the Marine Corps, to join the Marine Corps is 13 weeks. So we have the longest basic training of any other boot camp. So that's the first portion. And the difference is, joining the Air Force, you become an airman. Joining the Navy, you become a seaman. Joining the Army, you become a soldier. But joining the Marines, you become a Marine. And so we embody that title. We are that title. And we make people work really hard to be able to earn it, because we do consider ourselves to be the creme de la creme when it comes to the armed forces. And to be America's 911 force, we have to have a smaller service. And so we're roughly about 185,000 strong, plus or minus, given some reserves and given some active duty. But the difference is we are smaller, we are mighty, we do more with less, and we're the response force whenever things go crazy.
And what attracted you from the beginning?
So for me, it wasn't that I had a lot of family members who were in the military. That wasn't the case. But it's ironic the way I found myself getting to this point. So growing up, where I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, I was pretty good. But my senior year, I was expelled from high school.
Uh-oh.
I was expelled from high school my senior year. But prior to that, an Army recruiter contacted me, and they got me in, talked to me about what the Army had to do. And they kept talking about money. We can give you a bonus, and we can give you this, and you can see the world. And it really didn't do too much for me, you know what I mean? Because I didn't need that. That didn't define me. And I was never one that needed to have that type of thing. But then I went to Montgomery Mall, and I saw a Marine Corps recruiter there, and he was different. And he saw me and he said, "How many pull-ups can you do?" And I was like, I don't know. So he said, "Well, get on the bar and let's see." And I got on the pull-up bar, and I think maybe I did 5 or 6 back then. Nothing impressive, right? And his visual expression showed me he was not impressed. And the fact that he looked at me the way he looked, it was like, hold on now. I don't know if I'm comfortable with what you just did, but he talked about the Marine Corps in that moment. And he said, "This is a title that you have to earn. I won't talk to you about a bonus. I'll talk to you about a challenge. I'll talk to you about transformation. I'll talk to you about becoming a better version of yourself. And I'll talk to you about service before self." And at 17 years old, that was something different. I had never heard that before. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. And the day I turned 17, I was 16 at the time. The day I turned 17, I joined the Marine Corps. And about 9 months later, I went off to boot camp.
What an inspiring story. And it was your values that aligned with their values. It wasn't about the
Yeah,
money, which so
it
many
wasn't.
people, it is about the money.
Right.
And so talk about that. Where did those core values come from in your life that made that resonate for you?
Yeah, wonderful question. I give so much credit to the women in my family for me having the set of morals and values that I have right now. In today's society, the world will really try to be your moral compass. But my
Yes.
family, the matriarch of my family, my grandmother, and my mother and my aunt, they played such a critical role in me because I came up in a home with no father. There was no father in my home, so I didn't have that guidance. I didn't have those rudder steers from a male, but I didn't need that because that void was never seen, because the matriarch was always there showing me what right looks like. And what she passed on to my mom and my aunt, they raised me with they raised me with the premise of understanding that only you can define what it is you really want. And my grandmother participated in the civil rights movement. She's still here today. And when I think about all the things that she went through and what her values were and how she stayed true to those and didn't deviate from it, my mom got that. And when we talk about the money, she taught me what it was like to earn my own dollar. I remember her putting me and my younger brother in the vehicle, driving us to houses when during the fall and saying, hey, go knock on that door, tell them who you are, tell them that you want to earn your own dollar and you would like to rake their leaves. And I didn't understand it in the moment why she was doing that, but she was teaching me different values. She was teaching me that it feels better to earn your money this way. So when the Army recruiter talked about giving me something, it didn't feel the same because I was used to earning it, and earning it felt so much better than just giving it, because there's no value when you're given something. Free really doesn't feel like it's free at that point.
What's so interesting, I've heard of many people who've gone into the military, well, with perhaps a beginning a little bit like yours, that you were expelled from school, there was that
Yeah,
pivot point, but
right.
often because they need a course correction, they need to get
Mhm.
some discipline, which is fine, but it
Right.
sounds like you were already in alignment based upon the way that you grew up.
I
So
was.
yeah, so this was a good springboard, but it wasn't necessarily a course correction. Is that right?
Right, right. That's exactly what it is. It wasn't necessarily a course correction because I made the decision. Keep in mind, when I was 16, I'd made that decision. So I was 17 in my senior year. That's when that behavior started to happen. But I knew prior to the behavior becoming what it was, this was a general direction where I wanted to go, because
Got
I
it.
knew staying in my city, I was already feeling like I was at my ceiling, even though I was only 17 years old. I felt like I was bumping my head on that ceiling, and then it really became evident with the behavior in the circle that I was around. So it was more of a, what, this is where you should go. You already see this path. You don't have to figure out where you're going. Just take the step.
What would you say are and I know a lot of it is in your book, but before we get to the
Yeah,
book, or this might be
yeah.
the natural pivot, what are some of the greatest lessons that you feel you learned from being in the military, in the Marines?
The first thing I would say, one of the first things is the importance of self-reliance, self-direction, and self-discipline. The Marine Corps is great about, first and foremost, removing you from your situation, that transformation process being 13 weeks, and telling you it is now solely upon you to graduate. It's solely upon you to learn these skills. So you have to be self-reliant. You have to give yourself that self-direction. You're like, this is what I need to do. And more importantly, that discipline piece, that self-discipline. And so when you look at the root of the word discipline, here's what the Marine Corps is great about. Two ways I talk about it. They say the instant and willing obedience to orders, meaning the minute you're told to do something, getting after it immediately. But then the Latin term for a discipline comes from disciples, basically meaning to learn. And so they teach you that being disciplined and making it a focus, being an eternal student of yourself, your craft, and whatever you need. That's one of the hallmarks of becoming a Marine. So that's one of the first things, being self-reliant, self-directed, and having self-discipline. But then the other side of it comes in because the intangibles are what they really push. You get away from the things, you get away from thinking that life is about what can I get from it, and then they really help you see what can I give. And so when I talk about service before self, you have to understand that when you join the military, you raise your right hand, you say, I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And if we pause right there, this is saying that this is not about me. This is about my entire nation. And that's
Mhm.
an oath at 17 years old. It's really hard. And so I realized then, and what the Marine Corps teaches you, when you say you're going to do something, you exercise that discipline and do it.
That's powerful. And, we are in a time, and I guess this is cyclical, but at this exact moment, the
Mhm.
whole world is talking about the conflict in the Middle East.
Right.
And there are plenty of other conflicts that we may not be talking about, but that are
Of
occurring.
course. Of
You know,
course.
we're
Yeah.
focused on this, but there are conflicts everywhere. As a Marine, I'm sure you found yourself in the face of conflict, having to
Yes.
defend
Correct.
our country. And how can you, I mean, I know you can't talk about everything, but just going into the head of that,
Yeah.
when you are actually in war and you're actually
Mhm.
facing down whoever you understand the enemy to be, how do you get your spirit right for that?
The training and preparation that we go through as Marines is different from a lot of other people. Mentally, everything we do is designed for the end state, and that's to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. So it doesn't matter what your job is as a Marine. That's the purpose of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad. But at the end of the day, that's what your job is as a Marine. We say
Mm,
every Marine is a rifleman. And so that's taught from the day you get to basic training. You get that weapon and you master that weapon. Everything from breaking it down, learning to fire it, carrying it with you everywhere you go, to understand that one day there's a chance that I may need to use it. And so that preparation process happens, but it's still different. My first experience in war, my first experience in combat, I was 20 years old, so now 3 years into the Marine Corps, and I never knew that when I took that oath, solemnly swore to support and defend, I never knew I would actually have to defend.
mm.
But I got the notice from my unit. They said, basically, call your family, go home, tell them you love them, because in 5 days we're leaving for Iraq. So I had a 5 day notice at 20 years old that I was going. But
Wow.
even then, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel
Oh,
real. You know what? We're just going to get on the boat. We're going to go over. We're not going to war. We haven't been to war since Desert Storm. It's 2000. It's 2003 now. Who you kidding? No, it's not going to happen like that. But 30 days later, I was in Kuwait, and we were there for 30 days on Camp Shoot. And then at about the closer to the 60-day mark, we were told to come and get ammunition. And
mm.
that's when they loaded us out with ammunition. And we crossed what we call the LOD, the line of departure. And when we crossed into Iraq on March 23rd, 2003, I transitioned from being a 20-year-old boy and I became a man, because we were ambushed. And in a period of 4 hours, I lost 18 of my best friends.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, so and when we talk about the preparation and how do you prepare for it, you can't. You can't
Right.
prepare for those moments, because nothing seemed real in those moments while we were actively engaging the enemy. Nothing seemed real. It became real when I saw the people that I loved, the people that I
18
hugged.
people. That's huge. That's
Yeah.
ripping
I
your heart
share
out.
Yeah, I share that openly because every time I mention the Battle of Al Nazariya, March 23rd, 2003, I say that openly and I talk about it because I need people to understand what we actually did, what we went through. And that's one of the reasons how I got to where I am. And so when you ask the question, how do you prepare for that? We prepared for it by tough, realistic training, constantly, doing scenarios, what we call um, we do courses of action. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do this. What happens if your weapon jams? You practice it and you practice it and you practice it again. So you're able to react in that moment and you don't have to think about it. But, you know, when we lost everyone, it was very traumatic. A lot of people that I loved and adored. And, you know, I look back at it now, I'm so thankful that I made it through it, but I did struggle for a very long time.
I can
And
imagine.
if I'm being completely transparent, there still are many hard days, you know.
I'm sure.
Sometimes people, you know, when I tell the story, they ask, when was the last time, when were you in combat? You know, I say 2003 and 2011. And then they say, well, when were, somebody else can ask me, when were you in combat? And I'll say last night, because I've been through so much and have to deal with those things. But again, that is a reason why I decided to transition later on, because I needed to be able to provide a ready resource for people who were dealing with things like me, because I didn't feel like I had it at the time.
Amazing. We're talking to Dimyas Perdue here on Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. He is a former Marine telling us his story. There's a lot that we're unpacking in this story. He's also written a book. It's called Elevation Requires Change: The Journey Towards Purpose and Fulfillment. So, Dimyas, I mean, I got to go back to what you just shared, because you were in active combat
Yes.
twice. 18 of your, were they all men of your
All
brothers
men,
um,
all men at the time. We only deployed with males and with my unit.
who perished? Talk about PTSD. I
Yeah.
mean, like I can imagine, like you said, sometimes it was last night. You feel like it because it comes back to you. What is the support that the Marines offer to help you through these real life experiences? I mean, losing 18 of your brothers is real and
Yeah.
it doesn't go away. What is the support?
Right.
Because a lot of people, even if they aren't from the military, a lot of people suffer from
Right.
PTSD. Can you just
Yes.
address that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I think, you know, a lot of people may not agree with what I have to say here, but that's okay, because I'm speaking factually. I'm speaking from experience. The Marine Corps does a great job of teaching us how to be warfighters. They do a great job about teaching us how to go and fight the war, but we do a terrible job of helping people fight the war within.
Mm,
A great job of teaching us how to fight the war, but a terrible job of teaching us how to fight the war within. When I said I would go and do these things, I did that. And now I came back. And now when I start to deal with the issues with that, there's no preparation for that.
mm,
And when there's a crazy backlog because we don't have enough providers to be able to have these conversations, that's one level of difficulty. When you have an organization that praises emotion suppression,
mm.
that becomes a barrier to entry to address the issues associated with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
Because I know now, as this leader, if I go in and I'm admitting that I'm having some issues and I'm seen by somebody else, it could potentially be viewed in a negative light. Now, when we talk about the emotion suppression, it's praised because we have a slogan: pain is weakness leaving the body. Well, there are a lot of people whose body is broken because they have said this is pain is weakness. No, pain is the body receiving a stimulus telling you that there's something wrong and that it needs to be addressed. So when we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, let's think about it from that same standpoint. There is something happening with me mentally that needs to be addressed, but we don't address it for fear of backlash, being called weak, you know, being called soft. And so the culture is surrounding PTSD everywhere has not changed to be what it is.
Mm.
Are there support systems available in the military? The answer is yes. Is it adequate? The answer is no. Could it be better? The answer is yes. We need to do what we need to do to get away from the stigma associated with seeking care. And when
Mm.
we do that, the best way to do it is by demonstrating it. And that was something I did as a senior leader. You know, I got a message from a friend, and she sent me a message on Facebook and she said, my son is old enough now, and I want you to tell him how his dad died. And it crushed me. It crushed me because I'm like, I don't think I can do this, because I tucked it away. I compartmentalized all of these things. I compartmentalized everything and I took it away. So now it came to a head. It came to a head. This PTSD is now looking me in the face. I've never been to treatment because the first time I tried to go, I noticed the physician, the provider, I noticed they're looking at the clock. I
Oh,
noticed they're looking because I'm super aware of my surroundings, and I noticed they're looking at the clock. And I stopped my first appointment. I said, you know what? It is clear that you are more focused on the time than what I'm here for. So I'm going to leave. So that's another issue that happens
ooh,
with it because they know that there's another person that they have to see. It becomes cyclical. I've got another appointment. I've got another appointment. And when you feel that, especially somebody like me who ascended the ranks, when I finally decide to open up and I'm finally exposing myself to you to talk about this trauma, if you're not giving me what I think I need at this time, and if you're not making me feel like a priority, I won't talk about it.
of
And
course.
that's where the lens of emotional intelligence comes in there because the Marine Corps was great about teaching me how to wear my uniform. When I put on my service alpha uniform, I knew that my ribbons needed to be an eighth of an inch above the pocket. I knew that when I wore my belt, that it needed to, my alpha blouse belt, that it needed to be between 2 3/4 and 3/4 of an inch. Everything that was important down to the
So
detail, they
precise.
told me where to put it. So precise. But there was something I carried with me every day that the Marine Corps never told me where to put it. And because they didn't tell me where to put it, I tucked it away. And those were my emotions. And that's why people continue to struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder because they don't know how to be fully aware of what they're going through. And even if they're aware of it, they're not taught how to properly manage it.
So you've obviously given a lot of thought to this. There's a lot of processing that you've done. And as you say, you weren't taught how to do it. I mean, the
Right.
regulations, and you gave a few of them, are so precise, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the fact that this whole very important area wasn't addressed. What have you done for yourself? Because you sound like you are in the best possible space you could be in anyhow, not
Thank
saying
you.
that you don't go through things like you
Of
described earlier.
course.
What have you done to take care of yourself?
Yeah, the first thing the first thing I did is I really had to I really had to acknowledge that what I was feeling was real.
Mm,
I had to acknowledge that what I was feeling was real and that it was okay to not be okay. It's okay for me to not feel like I'm frolicking through a field of flowers. It's okay. It's okay to have that nightmare. That nightmare is because of what you've gone through. What's not it's okay for you to have these feelings, but it's not okay for you to be in this mood because this mood is what is affecting you more. And so that was one of the first things. And I said, okay, so what can I do now? Since there is not, since I haven't received the treatment that I wanted, or the guidance, or the assistance, however we want to title it, what can I do to be better? I said, I'm gonna get the education for myself and to make sure that nobody else feels the void that I felt going through this situation. So I went to school. I went to school, you know, got a general studies associate's and I got a bachelor's in psychology with a focus in military resilience. And that really wasn't enough for me because now I understand what it means to be resilient. I know what it means to help somebody and coach them through it, but I need to do more. And so I went on and I got a master's in human services counseling with the emphasis in crisis response and trauma. And I needed to do that because the level of crisis that people go through are different. The crisis for the 18-year-old that broke up, that girlfriend broke up with him, could be the worst thing that they've ever gone through. And
right,
it's comparable for them as the 45-year-old going through a divorce because
right.
that's their level. And as a mentor, as a coach, as a strategist, I need to understand that everyone's level of crisis doesn't have to be the same to me on the outside. So I wanted to be able to have the information to be able to coach people no matter where they are, no matter what they go through. And that's the reason why I went to school to be able to get that education. And that's the reason why I saw additional things outside of formal education, picking up books, understanding what type of readings are out there to be able to help people create new strategies to be better in life, which led to me writing one to be able to assist.
So the perfect timing because I want to talk about elevation requires change. And I just want to tell folks when you start reading that book, you like the energy. You got a whole lot of energy. Just boom, boom, boom. I feel like I want to jog while I'm reading.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a
Yeah,
tremendous amount of positive energy. The coaching comes through every sentence,
thank
and
you.
that's really helpful. You know, there are tons of coaching books. This one really does get you moving. in your mind, in your being, which I think is excellent. You talk a lot about resilience,
Yes.
and resilience is kind of a through line in your book. Define resilience for us, and what does it mean to you?
Resilience to me is being able to bend and not break, being able to bounce and not shatter, being able to stretch and not snap. That's what resilience looks like to me. It's being able to go through adversity, but being able to understand that at some point in time, this will end, and having adequate strategies to be able to help you through this moment. But being able to develop resilience is the main thing that you have to be able to do, because too many people too many people are not prepared for when it happens. When I was studying Professor Robert Dees, he said there are three things that are happening in a person's life. You're either going to a storm, going through a storm, and coming out of one.
Hmm.
And the goal is to be able to prepare for that. So when I talk now, I say, although you may not be in a crisis, although you may not be dealing with PTSD right now, you may have never been in a broken relationship, you may have never been abused, but just because you've never gone through something doesn't mean that that day is not going to come. And so the reason why I talk about resilience and emotional intelligence and being aware and managing everything that's happening in the book is because I want this to be your umbrella. And what I mean by that is you don't want to go and buy an umbrella when it's already raining.
That's true.
You don't want to go and buy it when it's raining, because now you're just soaking wet with the umbrella. The purpose is that you want to have that for the event of the rain. And so this is to prepare you for whatever that rain looks like. And so, yes, there's portions of the book that speak to resilience, but I would say that the greater majority of it is about recognizing where you are, owning where you are, realizing why you got there, how you got there, taking that, whether it was fear keeping you from getting to where you are, doubt, whether it's past failures, and then helping you identify, here are all the things we got to do to be able to manage that to get to where we need to be.
You talk in the beginning of the book. I love it, about your process of actually writing the book. So I'm an
Yeah.
author. I've written a number of books, and I know. I mean, you have to you have to do it, and you
You
talk a
have to
lot
do
about
it.
having to do it, right? Like
Yes.
this can't just be an idea. You actually have to do it, or else it doesn't get done. Whatever the it is, and you use
Right.
the story of writing this book as an example, which is so great because a lot of people who connect on Dream Leapers want to write books. So I love that
Yes.
you even talk about your process. But let's go into this notion of doing it, because a lot of people have
Mhm.
the dreams in their head,
Right.
in their heart. They often don't tell anybody, or sometimes they do talk about
Right.
it.
Right. Right. I like
Talk,
the
talk,
emphasis
talk,
on
talk,
talk
talk,
about it,
talk,
which is
talk, talk, talk. But there's a
yes.
big difference between, that holding it in, not telling anybody, talking about it a lot, and manifesting it. And
Right.
manifestation is something that you address a lot in your book.
Mhm.
Doing it. Talk about the doing
Yes.
of it.
So I was that person who was talking about doing it and not doing it, dreaming about doing it and not doing it, telling people I was going to do it and not do it, coming up with a strategy to do it and not doing it. So all of these other versions and things surrounding doing the activity was happening, but doing it. But what did it take for me to get there, to get to that point where I actually did the thing that I said I was going to do? I speak about it in the book, about what was keeping me from getting to that point. And what it was is I got a section where I say, when you identify, you identify. And what that means is when you identify your distractions, you identify the root cause of your inaction. And that misses with some people, but it also lands. When I identify all of the things that were distracting me from being able to put the pen to paper or to type on the keyboard, I then found the root cause of my inaction. And whenever there's something that's deeply rooted, what you have to do is go in and completely dig it up, get rid of it, so that way you can take action. Because all of those things steal from you. So I then, when we talk about the roots, I have a section where I talk about the weeds in your life.
Mhm.
So here's what weeds do when they're in the garden. Weeds compete for two things. They compete for nutrients and they compete for sunlight. So this is the reason why you have weeds in a garden that grows super tall. So they compete for sunlight and they compete for all of the nutrients. And so when you think about that with your distractions, When you think about them as being weeds, they are competing for the light. And there's so much light in you that you want to come out, but your distractions are getting that light because you're paying so much attention to them and they're getting the focus. So if your distractions are getting the nutrients and your distractions are getting the light, they're what's being fed and they're what's going to grow. So that's how you find yourself constantly on the scrolling, because your distractions are so deeply rooted. And so I had to realize, what are my distractions? One, telling people about it, being on social media, watching people do the thing I want to do because I want more inspiration. You don't need any more inspiration because it's already in you. You don't need any more inspiration. The fact that you want to write the book is enough. Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, he says, you would not have, if you didn't think the thought, then you wouldn't do it. But if you do think the thought, you have the ability to do it. And it's about putting the action steps in place. And so for me, that meant, of course, another note from the book, it meant getting lost. And getting lost to me, what that meant was getting away from my family, getting away from my kids, getting away from spending 2 hours in the gym, going on a long run just to clear my mind. The 6 miles, the 10-mile run you just went on that took you however much time. Imagine if you put that much time and intensity into getting rid of the distractions and actually writing out your thoughts. Or imagine if you had enough discipline to be dual purpose and said, you know what, I'm going to go on this run, but I'm going to take my phone, put it on voice recorder, and I'm going to talk out my thoughts when I get there. When I get back, I'm going to sit down in front of my computer. I'm going to hit Microsoft Word. I'm going to hit dictate. I'm going to hit play. And now I've got 2,000 words because I used that time. And so when I went to the cabin and I talk about getting lost as a process, the process of getting lost, the way I talked about it is, you have the journey of the sea turtle is how I mentioned it, because buried 2 feet under the sand, you've got these sea turtles, right? And now here it is, without being told, they hatch and they crawl to the surface and they have this innate thing that tells them, I need to get to the water. We all have that when we're talking about writing a book, but most of us are not even, first off, we're not even crawling to the surface and we're not getting to the water. But here's the beautiful thing about that process. That first sea turtle is moving on instinct. The second sea turtle is moving on instinct and now a path, because the first one has already done it. There are so many people who have gone before me that have crawled out of their situations, got to the water and did that thing. And I knew I needed to do that. Now, here's the second portion of it why I say get lost. Sea turtles are known for going to what's known as the Sargasso Sea. And that's where they go anywhere from a period of 5 to 10 years. And they're considered to be lost because scientists can't track them. And it's in that time where they go there, they feed, they nurture, and they grow, and they don't come back until they're adults. And they go back to that same land where they were. And typically that's when the females come back to give birth. So let's think about this. When you get lost, first off, when you crawl to the surface, get out of your situation, you get to the water, and you get lost, you go and feed, you go and nurture, you go and write, you write the song, you go and do the workout, you go and mend the relationship. And then when you finally get everything you need, you can now come back to the place where you were and bring birth to that idea. And that's how Elevation Requires Change came out.
That's beautiful. Hey guys, we are talking to Dimyas Perdue. He is the author of Elevation Requires Change, the journey towards purpose and fulfillment. And I know you can hear just from hearing what he's saying. I know you want to read this book. It is really compelling. I want to remind you all, you're here with me and Dimyas at Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. I knew this was going to be special talking to you, and it truly is. This image, Dimyas, of the turtle and getting lost, and that this kind of loss isn't a bad loss. This is this is living, this is growing, this is developing. That's the loss that you're talking about, which is
absolutely
from, you don't know what you're doing. You kind of are like lost in the world. This is a different kind of loss that you're talking about.
Absolutely. That lost is becoming vulnerable, getting away from it. I remember when I went to a cabin, and I remember when I first got there, I told my bride, told my family, hey, I'm gone. Cell phone off. I am off the grid. Told my boys, I am gone. But when I got there, that phone was like, hey, we got Wi-Fi, right? You can just jump on and check. Somebody sent you a message. Somebody sent you a message, and it was difficult that first day getting lost, because when you're lost, you want to be found. You want to you want to know that you're safe. And so emotionally, I didn't feel safe because I was outside of that comfort zone. But I said I gave myself a character count and I started writing. And then day 2, I got back. I'm still going and I'm at it. But then by day 3, I didn't want the phone because I identified that distraction, and that was the root cause of my inaction. And now I've got 10,000, 20,000 words. Because here's the thing, when we talk about writing this book, if it's really in you to write the book, why do you want to write the book? I wanted to write the book because I know that there are millions of people who never had rudder steers, who never had anybody who was a north-seeking compass, who never had anyone to give them the guidance to be a better version of themselves. Since I didn't have that, how many people would be missing out on something if I didn't do what I was supposed to do? Mm-hmm. And at that point, I no longer wanted to go back to the cell phone. Even when I got back, it's like, why do I need that? Why do I need that? Look at what I was able to accomplish during this time when I got lost. And here's the beauty of it. Let me give one more thing about the turtles process. There was a study done in Sydney, Australia, and they said that when that sea turtles have the ability to communicate with the other ones when they're in the embryonic stage, telling them that it is time to increase your development speed because it's time for us to hatch. So let's think about that for a second. They have the ability, if you're behind, they have the ability somehow speaking through the shell to tell the other ones that it's time to get ready. That's what this conversation, that's what I feel like this is about. And that's why I love being able to do things like this, because we are there and somebody else's gift is in that embryo stage. And I'm telling you, it is time to get ready because you need to crawl to the surface and just get to the water. Get to the water, because if you at least get there, then the process can start. But if you never get to the starting line, if you never position yourself for it, you can't take off. But you have to get to the starting line. I'm not asking you to run 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm just asking you to start. That walk will turn to the run. That run will turn to the sprint.
That is just start. It's like Nike, just do it. You have to take action. And,
yes.
The point of Dream Leapers, which I have the show, which you're on, where I talk to people who are living their dreams. But there's also an educational side to this where I do a lot of coaching work with people. The point being to help people access and activate their dreams. Not just access, but activate. Do it. The doing of it. Otherwise, you go, oh, how much time has passed? I said I was going to do this thing.
Right.
A year has passed and I forgot. Or like you said, I got distracted. In many cases also, Dimyas, it is people don't necessarily feel that their ideas are worthy of development. So that part, that sense of worthiness, I find to be very real for all kinds of people, even the most successful people. Well, but because my little idea, is that really worth cultivating? Wouldn't it be better for me to just follow along on whatever the safe path seems to be? Can you talk about your understanding of worthiness and how you can tap into that, especially if you are at a low point?
Right. That worthiness is rooted in something. That's rooted in something. The fact that you're saying, am I worthy? That means you're looking at someone else as being worthy. Were you told when you were younger that your ability to write wasn't what it was supposed to be, or you'll never amount to anything? Those are the things that could potentially get someone to start looking at their life and saying, I'm not worthy. You've got to find out what's the origin of the unworthiness feeling? What's the origin of that? Let's talk about that before we talk about, am I worthy? Because the reality is, you've got to find out, where did this come from? That self-talk has an origin. So where does that negative self-talk about you not being worthy come from? Because I know for a fact, when I was a kid, there was nothing I couldn't do. When I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you could not tell me I was not going to be the next NFL superstar. You couldn't tell me I wasn't going to be Superman. There was nothing I couldn't do. But somewhere in there, something happened to make me feel like I wasn't worthy of something. Typically, it's failure. When you fail at something, that makes it hard. It becomes a new barrier for you. And I talk about it in the book, and I use fail as an acronym. That's the first attempt at learning. Right.
Tell us, what does fail mean to you?
Fail. F-A-I-L. That's your first attempt in learning. That's your first attempt at learning. It is a failure. Failure is there to teach you a lesson. It's not fatal. It's not fatal. This is you saying that, okay, this didn't work. This didn't work out. So now I have the opportunity to do it again. And don't say that you're not worthy of it because you didn't get it the first time. You know, nobody makes every free throw. Nobody's able to get in a car and drive effectively every time. Nobody takes a test and gets 100 every time they do it. So that feeling of being unworthy comes from, one, something happened in the past, and two, what is your vision? Who are you looking at, and who are you considering to be worthy and saying that you're not?
Right.
Who are you looking at? What are you allowing to come in and change that level of self-talk? Who created that? Who is that person?
You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking of situations that happen to all of us, and even the most confident person. And what I say is, when for myself and my clients, if you find yourself pointing the finger at somebody else, blaming someone
Yes.
for your state of mind, for your circumstances, whatever the situation might be, what I say is wrestle that finger around and point it at yourself and ask
Absolutely.
yourself, how did I get here? What is my
Yes.
responsibility here? And then as it relates to worthiness, and I was just dealing with something in this space myself very recently, just feeling like there were some people I was working with who were not treating me properly, not
Yes.
giving me what I would say is the proper respect for whatever the work was. And I was really grappling with it. Well, I have a lot of tools. So I'm using my tools, like, no,
Right.
don't
Right.
succumb to the darkness. Look for the light. You started to point your
Right.
finger, point it back. Every lesson that
Yeah.
I have, Dimyas, I was pulling them out because I was wrestling this thing.
Yeah.
And finally, and I talked about it because it's important, I think, to talk about it with the right people.
Of
But
course.
then finally, I had to remind myself of both my value and my intention.
Yes.
And there's something you said at the beginning, and that rings through everything you're saying. Part of the intention is service.
Yes.
Service of the work, the moment, the humanity, they're all different levels of
Right.
service. And when I recognized my value, I had to go back and check, and okay.
Yeah. You have
And
to revisit
then,
those values.
yes,
Yes.
you have to revisit them. It doesn't matter what your accomplishments in the moment, you sometimes have to revisit them. And then the added intention, reminder of the intention of service. And then
Yes.
the negativity fell away, and I was able
Yes.
to
I
step
love it.
fully into my power. This is, and I'm glad I could say it out loud here, because I know when people are interviewing like this, people often think of you and me and people like us on a stage as different, that we don't
Right.
go through stuff. It's somebody else who goes through stuff, right?
Right.
But
Right.
we go through stuff, man. We go through stuff,
Yes.
and we have to do this process for ourselves. And your book, I think, is really helpful in guiding people through some of these processes. For you, what do you do when you feel low?
I have to remind myself why I got started. I got to remind myself why I got started. Like you said, go back and revisit the values. But I have to tell you, when I feel low, I immediately start giving. I give myself that Marine talk. I give myself that Marine talk because listen, we don't. My hourglass has already been tipped. And I don't know if there's more sand on the top of my hourglass or if there's more sand on the bottom. So I don't have the time to stay in this low position
Mm,
because I don't know if tomorrow's it. I don't know if when we finish this call that I'm checking out. And if I remain in that low state, there's a difference between a feeling and a mood. I can feel low, but I don't need to be in a low mood. That
okay.
mood is something that extends. I can feel low. That's okay because the average person has over 50,000 thoughts per day. And those 50,000 thoughts lead to over 200 emotions, 200 emotional occurrences, right? Those things make us feel a certain way. It makes me feel happy, makes me feel excited, makes me feel sad. But sometimes I feel low. Acknowledge the fact that I feel low is what I like to do. Hey, okay, now what? Now
Now what?
what? Now what? Can you do anything about it? Yes. Then don't worry about it. Can you do anything about it? No, then don't worry about it. You can't do anything about it. It's time to move forward. You have a mission to accomplish. Staying low is only necessary. Military talk. Staying low is only good when you're being fired upon. Don't fire on yourself. Don't
Don't
fire upon
fire
yourself.
upon yourself. Did y'all hear that? All right, let me remind you, we are here at Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole talking to Dimyas Perdue. He is dropping knowledge. Don't go low unless you're being fired on. That is a gem. And by the way, if we look at that metaphorically, Dimyas, sometimes we are being fired on spiritually,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so if you feel that you're being fired on spiritually, you may duck, you may
Right.
you may go straight to it. You know, there are lots of ways to address it, but what would you say is a process that people can follow if they do feel that they're being fired on spiritually?
Yeah. So this is why let's go back to, we've mentioned that preparation about resilience,
Hmm.
going through or coming out of a storm, and that umbrella, that preparation. Listen, what does your armor look like? What does your armor look like? And what's the source of your armor for when you're being fired upon? If the source of your armor is a friend who's never been in battle, that's not good armor.
Mm.
My source of
Yeah.
my armor needs to be through somebody or something. If I have another person that I use as a source to help me when I'm spiritually low, that person needs to be a warrior. Warrior means of, engaged in, or experienced in war. I need to have somebody who's been through this thing to be able to guide me in it. Well, if I don't have anybody who's experienced in it, I need to look somewhere else. As a man of faith, I look up. That's where my help comes from. That's my armor. So what are you girding yourself with? What armor are you preparing yourself with? What are you giving yourself to say, you know what, if I'm going through this situation and it's too much, but I don't know how to pray. For example, some people, I'm hurting so bad, I don't even know what to pray for.
Mm.
Maybe you don't need to talk. Maybe you don't need to pray right
Mhm.
now. Maybe what you need to do is just shut up and listen.
Mhm.
Maybe if you could just stop for a second. So here's the beautiful part. I love coming up in school when we would get words to scramble and make more words out of it. But here's
Yeah.
the beauty of the word listen. If you scramble that word listen out, you also get silent.
Wow.
So if you sit in silence when you're going through, no distractions, that's what allows you to be able to hear. Let's think about this. During the daytime, we've got so many things that vie for our attention. But at nighttime, when you can't see as much, you can hear everything. When that sight is gone, you can hear so much more, right?
True.
So in darkness, you're able to hear more things. So let's think about that emotional and that spiritual darkness. If you sit in silence, you will be able to hear the thing that you need to be able to get you out of that position. That's my note for that.
And I'm going to add that because what you have done in educating yourself in psychology, right? It is super important sometimes to get that professional help. You
It
know, a lot of
is.
times we go to friends and we expect them to be able to advise us. It's an
Yes.
unfair expectation, and it can be a dangerous expectation. I love
Absolutely is
that you
dangerous.
are a Black man as a psychologist. I hope everyone who's tuned in understands it is a point of strength, especially for
Absolutely.
a man, to get help if you need help. And you know, a lot of Black men feel that they shouldn't. That that's a sign of
Absolutely.
weakness. And we're
Yeah.
about to close, but I'd like to close with you giving wisdom, particularly to men. What can you say to
Yes.
men to help them uplift themselves, to elevate, as your book
Yeah.
says, especially in those darker moments?
Yeah. The book title is Elevation Requires Change. And
Yes.
the reason why I titled that is so many people, men especially, men, women, everybody, we want to elevate. We want to go to another level. We want to be better, but it requires change. But people want change. People don't want to change because of what it requires. They want the benefits of what change brings. And that requires work. And so when we talk about men needing to say that they need help, my youngest son is 2 years old. The first word, my life is on this. The first word he ever said, we were outside in our backyard, and I wanted him to step onto the grass. We were doing some work and I had a bunch of things up and I stood him on top of it. And he's standing there and I'm like, hey, come down. And he wouldn't come down. And he looked at me, and the first word my son ever said was help.
Wow.
And it was recorded, and you can hear it on the video. I said, did you just, my voice went all high pitched. I said, did you just say help? And I thought in that moment, I hope you never forget what it feels like to be in need and say help. I hope you never think that you're too big to say, I need help. Here's the thing. There are loads we carry every day, and that load gets heavier and heavier. And I have a story about that in the book. You can continue to carry that load, or you can shed that load. Shedding that load means asking for help. Let's get rid of the negative stigma that says that I shouldn't put my hand in the air because it makes me seem soft. It makes me seem weak. No, I realized when I put down the things that I was carrying, that's when I found true strength. When I sought God and I gave it up, that's when I found true strength. When I sat down in front of that therapist and said, I am hurting, that's when I found true strength. When I cried, that's when I found true strength. When I hugged and I didn't just embrace another man with the fist in between us, one hand around, and I openly embraced and hugged, that's when I felt strength. When I cried and we shared the stories with another man, that's when I felt strength. Strength is not holding it in. That's emotion suppression. Strength is saying that I am bigger than this situation and I can open up, because I want people to know that I can be vulnerable, because when you get rid of that, that's when you can show up as the best version of yourself. As long as you're holding that thing in, you're giving partials. You're giving your family 75% of you. And that 75% of you that they're getting is not the best version of you. That's the 25% that you're giving other people that you're projecting. So reduce that part. Get rid of all that part, that masculinity, because it's a false sense of real. That's a false sense of who you are. When you openly express it, stop telling people real men don't cry. The real show of that is real men do cry. Real men do cry. We have to be that example to other men, because, and that's what this is. I want to show you that emotion expression is one of the most beautiful things you can ever do as a man.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dimyas Perdue, author of Elevation Requires Change, The Journey Towards Purpose and Fulfillment. You have given us so much upliftment. I feel elevated. I bet you everybody else does too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. God bless.
I know that you all are feeling good after listening to Dimyas. Go get a copy of his book right now, Elevation Requires Change, The Journey Towards Purpose and Fulfillment. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.